Hello, everyone, and welcome to the next in our series of webcasts with our friends at NetDocuments under the banner of Work Inspired. Today's theme is Plan, looking at how firms can harness the power of collaboration, innovation, and technology to better coordinate teams and improve service delivery. Today, I'm joined with our friends at NetDocuments. Mike Creffield, thank you so much for joining us. Let's start with collaboration. Though innovation teams and budgets have been on the rise over the last few years, IT is mainly focused on business as usual. I wondered if we could talk about how each of you have found getting teams to collaborate on an innovation side of things. So if anyone has any ideas to start, why don't we do Laura, since you're Chief Legal Tech Officer, how have you found collaboration on an innovation side?
Lately that topic, I think I speak for all of us, has gotten more important because of the pandemic. And fortunately, we were working on some things beforehand because, for example, we always had people working from home, which we had to collaborate with and which we had to find ways to work with. So it came easy for us to transition our whole team to a work from home team. However, as everybody is working from home, we came atop a few issues, and I think everybody knows those. It's hard to have these let's say coffee meetings in between if you're doing it remotely. So we had to find ways there. We had to do more meetings. We had to do more collaboration through Microsoft Teams or also through NetDocuments to try and transition our traditional work in the office virtually.
Hang on, sorry, I had the wrong. Is that better?
There we go.
Perfect. Sorry about that. I can't even use the collaboration technologies.
The technology.
There we go. Yeah. Anyway, so I was saying, I suppose the first challenge was getting the lawyers to start using collaboration technology, in a way they'd never had to before. I think some of the people had never used these tools. Some of had never used it with their clients. So I think there's a lot of trepidation, a lot of learning curve in that. And I think the challenge now is, now that we've got to that kind of basic level and everyone's familiar with Teams and Zoom and WebEx and whatever else, is really, I think the question is now how you start using that for the other stuff, the stuff that's missing, which is even the social stuff, like Laura mentioned about the coffee mornings and stuff. But importantly for us, how do you bring in new lateral lawyers? How do you bring in the new crop of graduates? How do you make sure that the culture of the firm doesn't get lost, and that building out that sort of sense of serendipity and being able to go and pop into someone's office, and I don't think we've really figured out a good way to do that yet. So I think that's where we're focusing kind of a lot of our kind of innovation, I suppose energy is tackling those kind of problems.
Do you think, here's a question to the group, because we hear a lot from our clients that there was a rush to get this technology out to the teams, using Teams as an example, and now there's almost a sort of a step back where they're just making sure that there's sufficient security and governance around that. Now people, as you say, Jeff, people are now more familiar with using those tools. But do you get a sense that this was semi-rushed because it had to be, and now that there's a bit of a step back in the thinking? And Simon, you might have a view on this.
Yes. So in working as the CIO for legal in a bank, we've got a lot of control, as you can imagine, around the communications and the collaboration technology. So we do get asked to there is a lot of critiquing that happens around the collaboration technology. When we bring in new tools, there's always a push to make sure that they're like with the shift to implementing NetDocuments, that we open up all of the gears in the gearbox metaphorically when it comes to the collaboration that these tools bring. But we're always being asked then to stay on piste when it comes to the use of sort of enterprise technology collaboration. So what we're trying to make sure with the legal department is that we've got the right collaboration tools for the job, essentially. But obviously, we need to make sure that we've got the right controls in place, and we're not opening up new lines of collaboration tech effectively that mean that the bank has blind spots around communication. And that's where we work with some of these central teams to make sure that the technology that we're implementing is sanctioned in the broader context of the bank, and making sure that everything is kind of approved and is integrated from the point of view of the data footprint that the collaboration tools leave.
Yeah, that's a good point. Is that the same for you also, Warwick?
Yeah, Mike, I think it's interesting, and from this part of the world in Australia, we kind of look at what's happening in Europe, and obviously some of our states here in Australia have been locked down for an extended period of time. So we're sort of coming out of that, and I think that whole combination of working from home, coming back to the office. So a lot of organisations, particularly in Sydney, are starting to come back to the office, but it's moving forward, it's going to be a bit of a combination of work from home and work from the office. I think, part of the conversation that we're having with our team is, if you've got 5 hours worth of thinking work to do that at home. If, you don't have little ones running around or barking pets or whatever it happens to be. But if you've got to collaborate, you've got to, have those one-on-ones, come into the office. So I think, it's a brave new world for all of us, and how we used to work pre the 15th of March, and that's our key date here in Australia, the 15th of March, how we worked then to how we work moving forward is going to be very different. So I think it's very much a learning exercise for everyone, and for all of us, it's different. And with tech or no tech, I think tech's a sideline part of this story. It's really about how you continue to communicate in a world that was very different to what it was 9 months ago.
But you found yourself having to evolve from mid-March to now. Have you gone back and re-looked at some of those things that you implemented first off? How has that changed?
And again, I think part of the education now is providing options. So internally, we've been on a bit of a journey, but I think part of the key focus for us at the moment is actually encouraging, and Jeff, I think you highlighted, or someone highlighted earlier, it's about, trying to educate those lawyers who've traditionally, at best, picked up the phone, but used to, writing an email or writing a letter, now providing the opportunity, whether it's, via Teams or whatever other secure means of VC, communicating in different ways. And, even electronic signatures and stuff like that has really evolved here in Australia in the last 9 months, both from a bureaucratic, jurisdictional perspective, but also from a take-up perspective. So I think clients are also on that journey with us, and it's about how we can collaborate together and I think learn together. But part of that is also, which is always a bit of a challenge working in the legal profession, accepting that we're going to make mistakes along the way. We're not going to get this right each and every time, and this is new.
To speak on that,
I think it's a good.
Yeah, go on. Sorry.
Sorry, I'm just going to add that I think that's a good point. What Warwick mentions, that it's a learning process and it's an iterative process. So it's not one thing that you fix in the beginning and then it goes away. That's one thing I noticed within our teams at White & Case when we first started working remotely. A small example, like everybody wanted to have chats or catch-ups every day. But after a while, when this became the new normal, that became time-consuming and Zoom fatigue came in. And one thing that we realized is that every person works differently. So it's mindful to understand how every individual operates in this new normal, where this change behavior kind of sets in. And I'm sure many of you have heard now there's new positions coming out, head of remote work, for example. Because this is something that needs full-time attention. Directors, senior executives who currently have their full-time jobs, now they have to look at an additional thing, which capacity-wise, they might not have the time. So we've been hearing these new positions coming out, mushrooming in other industries.
Yeah, Richard, it'd be interesting to get your perspective as a consultant in the space, and having been at a large law firm before. What are your views on kind of how behaviors have changed and people are really learning to, or relearning to work together again?
Well, I think, as has already been said, the technologies that have been around for collaborating like Teams have been there for some time and have been, I think, tolerated rather than accepted. And what we've seen in the post-lockdown era is a real rush to make use of those tools and technologies. One of the big use cases we saw in BCLP, was my last firm, was just around resource planning. So partners in particular are so used to having their teams around them and being able to see who's busy and who's doing what. And there's a real sense of a loss of that availability, that ability to be able to see who's doing what. And so we were being asked in the KM team to set up teams and set up collaboration spaces using HiQ and other technologies, just to allow the teams to know who's working right now. Obviously, you can do this, and people are encouraged to do this using their Outlook calendars, but partners have got no interest in looking at a selection of Outlook calendars to see who's working, who's in the office, or who's where. So there's a lot of work around developing collaboration spaces to replace that kind of activity that wasn't necessarily directly connected with the delivery of work product. I think we have seen a pulling back from some of that, as people have said. One of the things I've noticed is that in the office and early on, we were having lots and lots of meetings just to stay in touch, and that certainly has dropped off a lot more in recent weeks and months. I think where people are getting used to the idea that they don't always have to use the phone. We've seen an increased use in instant messaging as well as a way to stay in touch. I think that was prolific in the business services side of BCLP going into lockdown, much less so in our fee earners, and I think that's another interesting trend.
I think for it's really similar points at Clyde & Co actually, being a sort of more of a traditional law firm model where actually those water cooler moments were the way that people connected, and you just sort of, people tend to talk to each other if they're in the same office. We did have issues around people regionally connecting or across practice groups. And really interestingly, I thought when we went into lockdown, people would struggle with new technology. It's actually been the opposite, where our teams have been itching to get their hands on collaborative technology. But because we've got a number of different tools in the firm that we've used through M&A, we've inherited all these different collaborative technologies. We're actually, to Mike's point, we're actually taking a step back and thinking about the security issues and what works before rolling one sort of standard tool out. We're taking a step back and saying what technology works for us in the future, what do we actually need, what do we require, but also all those security bits and pieces as well that I'm certain at the moment people have their own subscriptions and all this sort of stuff. So we're actually taking that step back and looking at that. But also really interesting, we've had an uplift in instant messaging, which again, as a traditional law firm, a lot of our lawyers didn't even log on to our, we use Jabber, they didn't even log on to it. Phone calls. So people again didn't pick up the phone and even talk to each other. And this isn't meetings, this is just spending the time to pick up the phone and have a 5-minute conversation. So it's almost gone slightly back to basics, where people are actually starting to have more of those instant meaningful conversations using that really quick technology, wanting to use the collaborative technology to have meetings in a sort of a different way. Also, a couple of people mentioned the social stuff. That's something we're still looking at, because again, there's a fear that we're losing that kind of culture. I mean, we've got our offices open, I'm here today, but I mean, it's about 5% usage at the moment, so no one's really coming in and using the space. So I think that's our next challenge, of how do we make sure we maintain that culture and morale in a remote world. So some of the stuff we're looking at is virtual spaces, so creating virtual rooms so people can go in and feel like they're in an office maybe, but they're not, and then start to use some of those spaces for having innovation meetings. But I think that's our next thing that we're going to focus on, because at least in the UK for the next 6 months, I think we're probably in for the long haul.
I think you're right, Sophia. I mean, another question really, that so what we're seeing, because we regularly take all the analytics from our platform to really, well, it's not that remarkable, but two stats that we've seen is certainly no surprise that the working day is elongated. So we're seeing a lot more activity pre 9 a.m. Talking UK time here, Warwick, mind, but yeah, we're just seeing people start their day a lot sooner and are working a lot later. But also another interesting stat is that typically, there was a massive drop over the weekends, clearly, use of our service, but we're seeing a fairly high percentage increase in the amount of weekend working as well. So I don't know how your teams, are managing their work day in this collaborative way, but are you seeing strange peaks yourself, Sophie?
Definitely, and I think I can only assume, because we've done a couple of surveys, but we've not sort of specifically asked those questions. But I think people's work patterns are changing. So people have children, they take a couple of hours in the morning to go and drop the kids off. So they start earlier, log off for a couple of hours, come on again. Same when they go and pick the kids up. So they log off for a couple of hours and come back. And we're starting to shift much more to a delivery model. So it's more important about what you deliver rather than this sort of concept of presenteeism, which I won't lie, before we went into lockdown, you had to be in the office. There was this very much, if you worked from home, it was, wow, that's really innovative. It's really innovative to work from home, but I think that's shifted a lot, where people are fitting their lives around their work. And for best part, we're hearing people are adapting to that. It's taken a while, but people are adapting to that and really liking that. So yeah, like I say, we haven't done any kind of data gathering, but one can only assume that probably contributes to a large part of it. And we're definitely seeing weekend work go up as well.
I think we're seeing a lot of that. I think a lot of that's driven by the clients as well, because obviously everyone else is in the same boat. So they're trying to fit their work around other things, and lawyers as service providers have to meet that demand. And as someone who supports the lawyers, we have to then pivot to make sure that we're available at the times that are needed, which is like I said, Mike, it's really difficult to predict who's working on what. And I think especially when you're not in the office and you haven't got that kind of sense of who's which floor is busy or which group is working on a deal or something, it's really, really difficult. And I think we've spent a lot of time getting more closely aligned with the practice group leaders to try and work out what's going on around the firm, so that we can figure out who needs that kind of immediate support.
Yeah,
Mike, I think that's really driven from a cultural piece point of view. I think certainly what we saw here in Australia is, unfortunately, some firms not allowing their staff to work from home. So there was a real trust issue at the first port of call. So it wasn't even a technology issue, it was a trust issue. And again, I think depending on where your firm is on that journey in terms of culture, I think is going to play out over time as to success or firms scrambling, because to invent that level of trust doesn't happen overnight. And that whole concept of presenteeism and having to be in the office 12 hours, 14 hours a day, I think that whole delivery process and working with your clients, again, I don't know what it's been like for you guys in Europe, but people have had their children at home for 6 months in the year and homeschooling, and if you've got kids in under 12, trying to do that whilst trying to maintain a full-time job, it's really challenging. So again, I think we'll see this play out over time, and again, I think as I said, those firms that are coming from a low pace, I think will be challenged moving ahead to work in this alternate universe.
I suppose one of the good things is that we talk about presenteeism, people present in the office getting the work, but now the focus is getting the best people wherever they are globally to do the work that's right for them. So where they've got the experience. So maybe there's this spread of work going on. I don't know if you saw that, Kayli, at Menzies.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in Menzies, we did have a bit of a culture of you had to be in the office and working 9 to whatever time. It wasn't necessarily 5 o'clock. But I think having people working from home and the more flexibility in their hours, people have realized actually, we can service our clients at different times, and let's find the right people to be doing that. And having that flexibility So yeah, absolutely. There's been a shift in, the thinking about who does what, and the times that people are working, and it's not necessarily 9 to 5 that people are the most productive. They're the most productive when they're doing the work that interests them, the kind of work that's most suited to them, and in times that fit around their own lifestyles.
I'd be interested to pick up on some of the wider points around innovation that's happening currently. I know Mike and some others have talked about how we've kind of gone back to basics and really had to figure out what the firm wants to do, what the culture means for the firm, and what technologies we should use. Just to look back pre-lockdown, pre-COVID days, when I say innovation, what does that look like within each of your firms? Jeff, why don't you start?
Yeah, I suppose what before it was really about a struggle to get people engaged with, trying to find those opportunities to innovate in that are not just fun and exciting, but actually valuable. And I think identify those areas that are actually really going to contribute either to revenue or to efficiency. So I think one of the things that's really changed is that I think, as other people have said, we've got now this people coming to us to use more stuff, and a lot of it's driven by the fact that I think you're seeing how you can use traditional tools that we had in different ways. We've got our marketing and BD group, they can't do in-person events, so they're having to figure out how to do client engagement with the tools that they've got, with the materials they've got, and things like that. So I think the lawyers are actually seeing that there's opportunities here, and there's opportunities that we can get involved in. So it's really about harnessing that group and trying to make sure that on top of the working day, you've got some time allocated and time given over to trying new things. And it definitely seems like there's a shift in that. We're seeing a lot more demand, and for us really it's about trying to make sure that we've got a clear kind of hurdle rate to make sure that we're using our limited technology time to focus on the things that are really going to provide some investment return.
I think one thing we were trying to do a wider case, and I think Alicia can correct me here, she has a wider view, is that innovation doesn't always necessarily mean technology. You can do something different and create more value without a piece of technology. And we're trying to emphasize that. You can just improve a process, for example. You can cross collaborate. You can work closely with your legal operations team from the client side, client service delivery. So that's one thing that we're trying to emphasize. And I think now with the lockdown, you have to do it. You're forced to do it. And I think that's kind of, if we can get one thing out of this, is this positive thing that innovation doesn't always need to be technology. And folks who are not tech savvy won't be hesitant of getting into this push of innovation, because it's not always related to technology.
Oh yeah, absolutely spot on. I agree with that point. I mean, at Deutsche Bank with the corporate legal department, we're taking the same view essentially, which is don't think that innovation and the technology or technological gizmos are going to be the silver bullet for everything that the legal department needs. We're looking at what does the legal department want to be when it grows up, metaphorically. So kind of a maturity view of each of the service lines of the legal department. And if the sky was the limit, blue sky thinking, what would you have? So how would you run your department? Not tools, but what would be the service model? Then we use innovation effectively to align technology to that maturity view. So it's led exactly in the direction you've just said, which is from the business and what the business wants to achieve, rather than what we believe technology can bring. There is a coming together, obviously, because there's tools in the market that help you understand through education and kind of best practice what's available. You can educate yourself and you can decide from there, well, actually there's ideas then that can lead to incubating thoughts around the maturity side of things. But we certainly don't hang innovation out there as being the key thing for transforming the legal department. It's a coming together.
Yeah.
I think that one of the sort of big things is that some of those kind of opportunity areas like digital signatures or electronic billing and those kind of things, were irritations before, but now they've turned into problems. You know, you take away people's printers and they can't do those things. So that's really forced that problem to become something that we need to solve. And I think that's, you know, like you say, that then turns it into something that actually gets attention and gets you know, innovation applied.
Yeah, I'd like to add a couple of comments. Hi, it's Alicia from White and Case. I mean, I think that there are a couple of kind of persuading factors that come into play. One is something you've just mentioned about digital signatures, for instance. That was something that people actually had to turn their hand to, roll up their sleeves and do it. And I think in the past, I think one of the biggest challenges in probably many organizations is actually getting people to trust the tool and to give it a go, because I can only speak really for legal, because I've been in that all my career. But certainly, although the heart is willing, the hands are not necessarily. So people want to talk about innovation and they think it sounds like a great idea, but they want somebody else to try it out first. They're not on my deal syndrome. And I think little things like, and I say little, but they're quite important, things like DocuSign, which we implemented at our tool, has meant that people have had to give it a go. They've actually found out that, yeah, it's not perfect every time, to what somebody said earlier, but it works. And so I think getting people to put their toes in the water is really important. And I think another thing that's quite important is to just be careful about how we use innovation, because actually innovation is here in a way. So it's not like it's the future. You know, we have to do things differently now. And, you know, certainly from a service provider perspective, the clients are demanding it, and they're demanding it not just in a pitch and an RFP and some general wording. They want to know specifically how you're going to apply new tools and processes, to Ahmed's comment, you know, on different types of transactions, and they want proof of that. So, you know, we kind of have to live the dream. So I do think it's about getting people's hands dirty, persuading people that actually it isn't something they were waiting for, and that is a nice aspirational thought, but we've actually got to do things differently now. And just back to an earlier comment about people and their skills and capabilities, I think it is important to think about people's mindsets and their capabilities in the context of all of this. It's not just about shoving a tool under their nose and saying use it. You know, some people laugh when I, you know, talk about mindset, but I think it's not just about skills. It is about this openness and belief and trust, which is really key here, to using these tools, and also putting people to their highest and best use. Somebody was talking about that earlier. We can't just say to people, what do you want to do? Okay, you do that. But there are some people who are going to be better at, you know, fronting up a tool. There are some that are going to be better at project managing. There are some that are going to be better at whatever aspects of it is. But I think we have to look at our people slightly differently, work out what they're good at and what they enjoy. And to the extent that it serves the business need, let's respond to that. And you know, ultimately get people using the tools and thinking differently.
Yeah, and a lot of them, you know, maybe secret innovation champions as well. I'd be interested to hear from Laura or Jane, you know, who it's not just the people with the title of, you know, innovation officer. Presumably you're getting ideas from, you know, a variety of faces across the firm.
Yeah, sure. Ideas come from day-to-day business, and so we are really we need our colleagues to come to us with the issues they have on a day-to-day basis, because otherwise we can give them the greatest tools. If they don't know how to work it into their day-to-day processes, it's wasted money and time spent on a great product or a software. So that has become one of the biggest issues to really make sure that the user acceptance is there, that people are using their tools right, and are actually improving their processes. Because you can, as I said, you can have the greatest program, people will find ways to work around it. And so that's one of the biggest issues we face. And Another thing we also face is, at least in Germany, it's regulation. It's things like GDPR. It's the authorities, courts, who, at least in Germany, we have a special official emailing program for lawyers. And now the courts are deciding that it's not good enough, and people still have to work with paper and have to print out certain things, which totally defeats the email, the virtual program in the first place. So those are all issues we have to work with and try to implement software into the day-to-day business of our colleagues. So it's really important to have this, to communicate with the people and listen to their issues and problems they have on a day-to-day business.
I'd be interested to just pick up on some of what you said, Laura. The way I've learned from the legal sector about how they approach innovation is either, as you say, look internally and see what processes can be improved, what workflows, what challenges you guys are facing, and to better streamline the experience internally so that it then trickles down to the client. But how much do you, and we've also talked about some of innovation is driven from the client itself. So I'm wondering from your guys' perspective, how do you balance innovation for the client, specifically on the client delivery side of you, versus innovation for the client, perhaps on more of a backseat business ops point of view? Laura, if you want to keep talking.
Especially with bigger clients, with international clients, it's difficult to implement or pitch them a new software idea or a new process, because you have so many stakeholders all over the company. So that's one of the biggest issues, to convince them that the effort to implement something like that, to implement a new process, is worth it in the end. So really convincing all the stakeholders, all the businesses, and especially finance, to invest in a new process, in a new software, and convince them that it actually brings a benefit versus the way they are working right now. So this convincing is really the biggest task for us right now.
Can I just add to that? I mean, I think there is certainly the persuading people to that doing things differently is going to be better, but I think we just need to listen to what the client's pain points are. I mean, it's been said a million times, but let's push against the open doors, and if there's something that's causing them particular pain, or indeed us particular pain as a service provider in terms of how we serve them, let's turn to that first. And also, I think listening to what clients are sort of saying between the lines, and trying to work out whether there is actually a problem there that we can help them with, because once within the internal teams minds, once we've done something differently and it solved a problem for a client, they're going to be much more open to doing other things differently. So I think it is a bit of a continuum and a toolkit, and really important to stay flexible, and also within our resources, what you can do for one client, maybe you can't do for another client. So work out what are your sort of what are the things that people can do easily and quickly, the quick wins, and then what are the things that take much more time and investment, and think carefully about where you break new ground with those things. So I think it is about a toolkit and a continuum and flexibility to try and really solve real problems first.
Yeah, and how that allows you to stand out from the crowd as well, from your competitors. I know, Richard, if you've seen that in the firms that you've been working with, how they asking you to, how they establish a differential for themselves over the competition.
Well, I can certainly speak to what happened at BCLP, and just last week is the 1-year anniversary of BCLP Cubed, which is an alternative delivery arm that came about from, just as Alicia said, it came from talking to GCs and having GC roundtables and listening to what it is that our clients actually want, that law firm clients are looking for. And as a result of that, BCLP Cubed came about to deliver solutions. Some of them are sort of based on standardized volume delivery, but others are bespoke to particular client needs. And I think Alicia's absolutely right. Clients will tell you what it is that they want if you go and talk to them. And it's the same thing with internal innovation. I think it's that listening to people, it's understanding what the requirements are, and then analyzing those. I think a lot of innovation at some firms is supply-led. So there are innovation teams out there who will just look at what's new in the market, and they'll be very focused on new technology, and they'll identify and say, okay, what's the business problem that this is going to solve? And I think actually turning that, or at least balancing it to be somewhat more demand-led, and asking your users and stakeholders what they want, and then trying to match that, not just to the new tech that's out there, but as has already been mentioned, looking at your existing estate, looking at what solutions you have that can be used or reused or repurposed. And again, from BCLP, from the last 6 months, I don't think there's any new technology that's been bought or deployed to support the change. It's been using what's already there in the way it was intended, or repurposing it to make better use of it. So I think listening is absolutely the key thing in this, and then figuring out what your strengths are. What can you do? Do you need to develop something? Can you partner? We see a lot of firms as well partnering with providers rather than trying to do this themselves, and bringing the legal expertise and the legal service delivery rather than trying to be software houses.
Just to agree with Richard there, and just to add from a perspective from a organisation that buys a lot of legal services, we do see, I certainly see as CIO, a lot of requests coming in to have a look at this technology that a specific law firm is using, because there's a lot, the ecosystem's huge and there's a lot of activity around legal tech going on. But we've now kind of settled into a way of working. I think Rich has just mentioned it there, around it needs to be mandate driven. So we could end up with shopper's blindness of the highest order if we're not careful. If we start looking at everything that everybody's using out there, it needs to be focused on, well, the law firm is going to be, they're offering to work with us on a specific mandate, and as a byproduct of that, they're going to be using technology X or technology Y, and it might be something they've gone out and bought in the market. It could be something that they've developed themselves. And then that serves two purposes, really. It means that hopefully it streamlines the service they're providing, gives us a higher quality, higher value service to the bank, but it also helps us to experience that technology that we might then want to go and procure ourselves, so it doesn't just become mandate driven. So if they're using, for example, a case analytics tool, and it's something that software as a service we could go out and buy ourselves, we try before we buy as well. So we get improvements to the mandate as a byproduct of the law firm using it, but we also get the opportunity to then say, well, this could be good for the bank. We'll go out and we'll get this ourselves.
I think to echo what everyone's really been saying is that clients know that law firms can do legal analysis, can deliver a law. What is it that you can do differently now? How do you distinguish yourself? And I think the mindset here, other than the tools that you bring in and all that, but the mindset, to change it to that, this is a win-win situation with working with your clients. So whether, for example, you're able to be more efficient, you pass some of the savings to your client for more work, and negotiate something with your client. One thing I've been hearing a lot from our clients is that they want us to be proactive in the market. Proactive in trying to understand what our business needs, learn about my business, take risks with me, and this is how you differentiate yourself from the competition. So these are some things that we're looking at. We're looking at doing some trainings for some clients, for example. We asked them, okay, what is it that you need, and they point blank tell us, well, you need to tell me what I need. I don't know what I don't know. You know my business. You're supposed to know my business. You tell me what I need. And this is really, I think, how you one of the elements to differentiate yourself.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And I think just to add to that as well, as something that clients are looking for is for the law firm to be easy to work with as well. So easy to be build, easy to bring in new matters, easy to kind of transfer information and documents. And I think that's a real area that maybe has not been at the forefront of having that kind of client experience or customer experience, and making that an improvement. And especially now that's been brought firmly into light, now that you haven't got the paper going around, you haven't got the kind of meetings, you haven't got the that sort of element, it becomes more and more important to be a really easy, and comparatively firm to work with.
I think that's a quite important point. At Menzies, we implemented a client portal, and that really was a push from us rather than a pull from clients. It was largely driven by GDPR, but we had much bigger ideas around it. And, we did have pushback from a number of clients, but then we also had clients coming to us and saying, that's really great because it makes my job of being your client easy. We implemented systems where they knew exactly what information they needed to provide to us. They could see visibility of the progress of the work throughout the period of the job, and the feedback. And particularly then when COVID hit, we were just quite overwhelmed with the really positive response to it.
Yeah, that's similar for us. That portal point is really interesting because pre-lockdown, I think we'd got ourselves into this sort of, a portal means a client can go in and fill in a form with all their instructions, submit all their documents, which, okay, but it's actually easier for a client just to send an email with all that information. I think to your point, Kylie, having one place they can go to that actually tells them where their case is up to, they've got a one-stop shop for all that information, is now the sort of portals that we're looking at. And actually in many ways easy for us to develop because they're not entrenched in process. It's just, it's just a read-only view sort of place they can see everything. So it's certainly something that has sort of changed. Our clients are now coming to us and asking for.
Yeah, and I think you see that from, when you're at home and you log into your bank or your insurance provider, that's the expectation. And I think, so Simon at the bank, Deutsche Bank has got a great set of customer portals that, it makes it easy to work with as a bank. And, we probably just need to step up to that as well.
Yeah, I think the other thing is that, I think simplicity is really key, because I think you can over-engineer these things so they take ages to build. They're pretty complicated and not necessarily intuitive to find your way around. And, I think at the end of the day, what people want day to day is the stuff that they need day to day. And there's always the extra gilding of the lily, which is great. But I think if we're too aspirational or too complicated, the over-engineering, it becomes a barrier to that ease of working. And I think that's I'm going to confess that I never really sort of thought about it exactly in that way. We need to be easy to work with. Clearly it's a people business, so relationships are important. And clearly we need to collaborate. But actually that ease of working is, as we've all learned more than ever, is absolutely critical to your mental health, if nothing else. So I'm going to take that away and just think about that angle, that specific angle, which I think is really important.
I'd like to bring, we've only alluded to it ever so lightly, but automation is, of course, kind of the one thing that comes to my mind, and something that's been steadily on the increase in the legal market. Briefing does a legal IT landscapes research every year, and we ask the law firms how they're using automation and AI, and I think we've gone past what my creative director would call the hype unicorn cycle, where it's no longer hype, and it's finally being able to find some good outcomes that automation can bring. From your perspective, what are those key areas that you think we can leverage automation to, better streamline your process, better make working with you as easy as possible for your clients? Laura, why don't you take that one?
Yeah, look, it's interesting. I have a particular opinion on AI. I don't think it's lived up to the hype. And again, I think that will slowly improve as the software improves over time. But again, I think it's been a journey that hasn't necessarily delivered. There are so many pieces to the puzzle in any matter. AI certainly assists, but it's not taking the total control away from the lawyers. I think one segue that I might make, which kind of links back to the innovation point, and I think it's sort of been touched on briefly, is from a litigation perspective, I think COVID has really changed the playing field in the way in which litigation is run. I think some of the blockers in terms of historically, plenty of law firms were keen to streamline the way in which their litigation files were run, but part of the blockers were generally the bench or the bar. And again, like all of us, we've been thrown in the deep end. And I've just been amazed at certainly the courts in Australia, how they've managed to pull stuff out of the top drawer that must have been sitting there for an extended period of time. And they've been able to get on with cases and, even significant hearings, high court matters, all being run virtually, usually from a couple of law firm boardrooms or barristers' chambers. And again, I think that ability to embrace change, particularly from the bench and the bar, will be a game changer moving forward.
It's interesting because I would agree with you there, Warwick, on the AI piece. We were working with, I won't say what software provider, but I'll probably give it away when I talk about what process it was. We were looking at our matter intake process, and we were on one of the early adopter schemes of some AI that would help sort out whether there were conflicts existing on a matter. And to your point, there were so many scenarios involved and so much, the process itself obviously is a risk process, that actually it just became impossible to kind of write this sort of code that could identify these things. So we spent a good solid year trying to look at that. And actually, when we looked at the cost of the people that would do that, actually it just didn't weigh up, and it's just that technology is just not ready yet. So for something that would seemingly be a straightforward process, and you could save a lot of time, and it just didn't pay off for us. Where we're looking at automation, and I do think we are probably behind other firms, so being big four, they're definitely further ahead on the data front, but we're looking at automation in data, so production of reports, and you're probably all way ahead of us on that, but production of reports, people are spending an inordinate amount of time producing MI, whether it's for clients or whether it's internally, and all sorts of MI, actually using some automation just for the production of that data and shifting those people to do the insights and the commentary. That's the kind of key focus for us initially.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think about AI from both the previous people, but because I think AI is no kind of substitute for having good data and good process in place, and that's the hard bit of automation is having that first, and then automation is kind of easy because you're just then converting it. But you can't shortcut, and AI is not going to come and clean up your horrible messy data and pick it out from different repositories. So I think that's
sorry to interrupt, and I think it's interesting, it was touched on earlier, we all like to over engineer stuff, particularly lawyers. They love to over engineer stuff. Interestingly, we use an offshore team, and the workflows that we provide them then get workflowed 1,000% from what we give them originally. Now, if I got to try to do that in my own office by my own lawyers, it would take me eternity. But the offshore team, in terms of the way they do that stuff, our ultimate goal is to offshore as in terms of process, and then ultimately over time, a bit like the accountants did 10 years ago, bring it back onshore once the AI gets up to speed. Because again, as we know, lawyers want to get everything 100% right, and in this game, 70% right is good to start with, and then it's incremental improvements from there. And lawyers don't necessarily think in that mindset. And I know there's a whole risk associated with that we've got to manage, but I just think that workflow process is and for many of our processes, it's quite complex. So again, if you can utilize experts in workflow to streamline that for you and then bring it onshore over time, that might be the key.
Yeah, and I think just on the automation, I mean, a different type of automation, but if you're automating documents, I think the quicker wins, and I say rather than quick, are where you have suites of documents where there are, oft repeated names or terms that you can automate. You automate once and it populates all. That's one of the quick wins. The other thing is the shorter documents rather than the longer documents, where you don't try and factor in every legal nuance and potential situation, because it's another case of over engineering. I think with doc automation, many years of people trying to do it is they've tried to reflect in the automation every single possible permutation of language, and it takes too long to automate, and it's too long to actually for the user to answer all of the questions in order to produce the first draft. So it's another absolutely classic case of, keep it simple, and then you'll get an outcome which you can from start to finish, you can actually have a product that can be used, and then the user can use it.
I think that's absolutely right when it comes to automation. Again, one of the things I was responsible for at BCLP was the automation program, and we wouldn't automate anything that didn't have an ROI of less than 12 months. We always looked at the documents, where they were used, what types of matters, and then went back and did analysis of how many of those matters we'd done in a year, looked at the current time to produce a document, and then based on the estimates of the reduction, and you can achieve 80% plus reduction in time to first draft, but it is time to first draft, it's not time to final draft. And you shouldn't aim for final drafts in those longer documents, because you're not going to achieve it. Yes, if it's an NDA or an employment agreement or something simple, you can expect to have the automation solution produce a final version for you that you can send straight to a client. And we did that. We did a lot of client work on around settlement agreements, where we would ingest data from the client's HR system and produce hundreds of settlement agreements in seconds. That type of relatively simple document you can do, but when you're talking about an SPA or a facility agreement, we automated those, sure, but and we could say 15, 16 hours of drafting per document, but they're not documents that are produced very often, and you still then need to go and get it over the line and finish it. And just to pick up on the AI, I think vendors have shot themselves in the foot by labeling everything as AI, when actually it kind of devalued the term. Things that used to be called search are now called AI, and it can be very confusing as to what you're actually getting if you're looking at an AI product. And as someone who specializes in knowledge architecture and information architecture, I would always advocate that back to basics. Look at your information architecture before AI. If you don't have good quality processes around data, matter inception, all the way through to closing sets and deal bibles, then putting one of these tools in is not going to help you. There's a lot you can do around really good quality data with the tools and systems that you have, and really good quality search will solve a lot of the problems that AI will claim to solve.
Just to wrap up our last few minutes, I'll ask one more question. With the backdrop of everything that you've learned over recent months, I wanted to ask, if you had unlimited resource, time, people, money, what one thing, knowing what you know now about what you need to change in your business, maybe you've had to reprioritize or accelerate certain change projects, what one thing would you do if you had unlimited resource to change anything? Let's start with Warwick.
Wow, that's a question. I think probably, I don't think I would change anything. It's probably about moving forward. And that's really about, because there has been so much change in the last 9 months, and look, I'm a person that loves change. But, going back to Alicia's comments there earlier, I think really now we're with this now moving forward. And really it's about ensuring that we're getting the most from our team, and ensuring that we're getting the most productivity, and that fundamentally means training and education. And that's not only just in relation to tech. I think, it's been touched on earlier throughout the session. It's, how we interact and all that goes with that. And that's a real learning curve moving forward.
I think mentoring, just want to chuck in there, and mentoring is something that we're seeing actually springing up, in fact, Asia Pacific's most recently. So I do think that we are a people business, and we're all a people business, really, in terms of who's here today. And I do think that how we work on collaboration and developing people and understanding each other and working together is really important. And I think for those new joiners to the firm and the new lawyers coming up, some more focused kind of mentoring and development and embracing of them is really important.
Of course, I'm going to be biased and say this: further investment in business services teams. So project management, process improvement, trainings in Lean Six Sigma, for example, trying to get more people involved in these initiatives.
I think that's a good point, Ahmed, because I think a lot of people have this perception, let's just innovate and put in new solutions, and they forget about all the things that go behind that, as in looking at your processes and looking at, what are the outcomes that you actually want to get from, using these technologies. And that's a really important part of it. You need to have that process analysis before you can have a successful outcome in implementing a new technological solution.
I agree on some similar points. Obviously, being projects and change is my role, so I'm going to be biased and say that. But actually, I would, I've never been one to want to build this mini internal empire that becomes the experts. I think that's about educating the whole business to have a better understanding of how you build a business case, why process re-engineering is important, and a better understanding of change management itself. So if we could invest anywhere, it would be that broader piece and getting the whole population more upskilled in those areas, so that if they need to do a bit of continuous improvement in their own teams, they don't have to rely on some kind of central expertise. They can do that. If they have a change initiative that they want to roll out, they have the skill set within them, within that team. They know how to be change advocates, and they can do that themselves. So that actually you're using your sort of smaller, leaner central team to do the more sort of strategic enterprise stuff. So if we had anything, it would be investment in the broader piece around that.
All right, then. Thank you, everyone. Mike, I don't know if you have any closing remarks and some of the trends that you've seen that we've talked about here, or that come from your clients in terms of, I guess, learnings and takeaways from this time, and what this series is all about, Work Inspired.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, let's do that. So yeah, I mean, it's great to have such a mix of voices today representing. We've got law firms, accountancy, financial services, consultancy practices, crossing the UK, Germany and Australia. So that's great. So thanks for participating in this roundtable. It's actually the third session in a thought leadership series. We want to understand how firms are delivering wide strategic value. So it ports back to what we were saying earlier about, you guys listening to your customers. We're listening to our customers and our potential customers all the time. That's how we strive to make our platform stronger. So we covered Organize on a previous session, which is document and email management. It brings all the content into a single matter file, predictive AI-powered email filing and OCR. And then we did Protect last time, where we discussed advanced access, encryption and governance controls. Deliver is going to be a future session that we're running with you guys around document bundling and secure sharing, something that you touched upon, Richard. And finally, the Learn piece, our Learn solution, insights, analytics and reporting. Again, we touched upon that today. So gain deeper, more actionable understanding of both documents and how people use and engage with those documents is important. And today, we've focused on that collaboration piece, what we would term our plan solution, which is all about coordinating teams, tasks, integrated messaging, tasks and workflow. So, it's great. It's been great listening to those thoughts. I'm going to share this with our development team as well for some insights. And yeah, we think it's just great to listen to people that actually are doing this stuff on the ground rather than us that aren't always. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for a great session and for inviting us. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you very much.
Cheers, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.